Hello, everyone. Welcome here at our playful experience, the art of doing absolutely nothing, which is part of our venture called The Joy of Living Questions. And there will be some unfurling of questions as well. So welcome. I'm Hannelie, and I'm currently finding myself here in the city of gold, Igoli, which is Johannesburg in South Africa. And my dear friend here is Lee. Lee, tell us a little bit about what's happening there by you.
Well, good afternoon, Hannelie. I'm in England, in Prince's Risborough, which is in Buckinghamshire. The weather here, unfortunately, has been a bit rainy, but we needed a bit of rain. You know, what can I say? I'm just really pleased to be here. I'm really pleased that we're starting this journey, that there will be these questions that we want to explore and unfold. And I love the title. Sorry, I got all excited about it. I love the title, Living Questions, the Joy of Living Questions. For me, I could sit here and explore that title till the cows come home. Something about living, unfurling, something more than talking and thinking about it, something of turning it into an active participation in the life process. Wow, what more?
That's wonderful, because we've spoken about this before so many times, about it's very easy to have a concept, like this idea, but it's something very different to actually live and experience it. We can read thousands of books and we can become very knowledgeable. But if we don't live it, it has no real meaning. It's just still something part of our mind space, but it's not really in ourselves. And I brought something with. I just picked it up from the tree, because it still has a, there's a leaf on it. And I can smell it. But if I see a picture of it, it's not the same experience, because they are smelling delicious from the, I just love it. And if you rub the skin a little bit, even more, it's just that freshness of lemon, a fresh lemon, just picked up from the tree. It's a very different experience from actually even buying it in a shop, because it's been lying there. But that act of picking it, and if it's like a fresh fruit which you can eat, like peach or a apricot or something fresh, just incredible. It's a very different experience from reading about it on the internet or even in a book, or in an encyclopedia. I can't even say the word anymore. But from the experience, from the concept of a lemon and what we can do with it. So I'm really curious to see where this is going to lead us, because I think it's incredible just to, if we talk in terms of, explore in terms of the art of doing absolutely nothing, what can that all be about in an experiential way? Like really using all our senses by just being, not even thinking. Because I don't have to think about it, I just do it. And there's doing it, yes, but it's also me experiencing that easiness of me experiencing this, coming from nature and fresh in my hand, and can feel the texture and everything. So I love that. So it's that easiness, and I'm thinking, what will it be like to be this? Just even for a moment, and that connection with it. So I'm really excited about this. Thank you, Lee, that we can explore this, and I think we can talk about it for hours. This art of doing absolutely nothing. But I want to drop in something before we even go into that a little bit more. In my view, when I think of what that could possibly mean, living that question of the art of doing absolutely nothing, for me, it's not about denial or procrastination or apprehension or laziness or boredom as such, being frustrated with the world. It's not about that for me. It's about presence. Of being present to whatever is happening around you. And I'm now being present to that. What triggered me now is that image behind you, which I've seen many times connecting with you in this way, but now being with it, it's a very different state of doing absolutely nothing, going nowhere to go to, even nothing to say, and nothing to do, the doing part, but just being with that image behind you. It's a very different experience. And we love to start from a place of gratitude. So I'm deeply grateful to feel this gratitude to be in this space with you right now and from whatever is going to unfold. So I'd just like to invite everybody, let's just for a moment, before we really dip into this and what it could, this living question, what it could be, to be grateful for whatever it might be, to bring that into this space, wherever you are, in whatever way feels good to you and appropriate. As we sit with this gratitude and experiencing it and feeling it, I have an invitation just to notice what comes to us while we do that without doing anything. It might be very subtle. It might not be very definable. I don't know about you, Lee, but I felt, I still do a movement in my body, like between my chest and my belly button. I feel movement, and I haven't done anything. So I'm simply becoming aware of that movement.
Absolutely. There's something, as we've got this moment of stillness, I almost think the art of doing nothing is the art of letting go. To do nothing. There's something stripping away there, isn't there? There's something where we're actively releasing, we're actively letting go, we're letting go of doing this. What is this doing? Is it the busyness of life? Is it the projecting to the future, the possibility that might be? Is it an emotional content? But whatever we're doing, as we stop doing that, there's something always behind it. As you said, there was an experience, a presence, a feeling. Perhaps if we let go of the doing, we're going into being, which brings us questions of, what is it like when we're being? What is my experience of being?
Yeah, as you're speaking, listening to you, if I normally would listen to you, like if we have a discussion or conversation, whether it's spontaneous or not, it feels like I'm hearing more when I'm simply being. So not listening to understand, not listening to receive, not listening to evaluate, simply listening, being. Because I wasn't thinking of listening. But I notice when you're speaking now about the letting go, my experience of it was a kind of surrender to the moment. Like just letting go of all that control and all the preconceived ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And just notice what do I really hear when you're speaking now? If I'm simply present here with you in this way. Because there's no outcome, or we don't need to get to agreement about something. Because that's all doing. But simply being. So whatever happens is good. And when I say good, it's not about good and bad. It's simply, it feels good. At least in my experience, it feels good.
And as I'm listening, there's something there that the word grounding comes to mind. There's something touching down in this being when we're not doing. There's something that seems to, we're touching down, we're connecting with the earth. Are we dissipating energy? And are we, in letting go of the doing and moving into being, are we perhaps in one sense locating ourselves in time and space? Are we now locating ourselves in the here and now? That's the time part of thing. We're moving away from worrying about what's the past or the future, but actually we're coming here into this present. And you mentioned there about hearing and listening. And I think that's something that is very grounded in that mindful presence experience. And in doing so, we're connecting, which orientates ourselves. It orientates ourselves in a space. We are connected in this space. And when you started today, Hannelie, it was so beautiful that you said, look, here we are and we're coming together in a space. And I think that's part of being. What you are, when you're being, you are most definitely located in a space.
So, a very interesting insight comes up now as you're saying that. As humans, the way we grow up and learn and being educated and go on our explorations to find our place in the world. It's all about doing. And it freaks us out. I mean, in our early 20s, to have to find our place in the world, even as a child between 0 and 7 years, we find our physical space in the world. But it's not about doing in terms of not as a child, but as a young adult. And how much stress and worry and fear and concern that bring. So imagine if we just enter that space by being present what's showing up around us, instead of having to achieve, having to prove ourselves, because it's about orientation. And it's a very grounding energy. And we have access to everything around us from that space. So it's where we move from into the world. So for me, it's a space of equilibrium, whatever you want to call it, but it's grounded, centered, present. But it's also a space I don't have to do all these things to be me. I can move from here into the world, so whatever shows up and happens, it's okay.
And you're in South Africa, aren't you, at the moment, in Johannesburg? Yeah. Did you ever have a program called the Magic Roundabout?
The Magic Roundabout?
It was a children's program.
Yes.
And in there was a character called Brian the Snail. And the wonderful thing about Brian the Snail is he takes his house everywhere with him. He's a snail. And I think, is that perhaps one of the gifts that we have when we stop doing, we let go of doing, and we come into this space of being? This space, yes, it might be a physical connection to the physical environment. Yes, we can, our awareness can connect us to where we are, but equally our awareness can connect, as you said, I'm having insights, I'm connecting with something internal, something that is the essence of me, that wasn't there because of perhaps I wasn't seeing. So there's almost like, we're a bit like Brian the Snail. This space is a space that we can take with us anywhere we want to. It's a little bit like the medieval poet Dante, who famous for the Divine Comedy. And I know you know this is something that I really love, is this poetry, because it's a transformational journey of the soul, as well as society, and as well as being a spiritual journey. But perhaps the important thing that he's getting at, that this idea of heaven and hell is a state of mind. It's a place that we take with us, rather than there being a physical orientation or a physical space somewhere out there in the cosmos. This is something that we carry with us. So the space and the time that we're talking about perhaps is contained within, and we can take it with us wherever we want.
You're actually speaking about Dante, someone that I really treasure, his art specifically, is Monet. And my whole experience of Monet changed when it really transformed when I heard a story about him. And he's speaking about what you just said. And Einstein spoke about as well. When he had a dilemma that he wanted to resolve, I don't want to even use the P word, he said he was simply sitting with it. He wasn't thinking about it. He wasn't looking, critical thinking, trying to, explore it. He was simply sitting with it. And then a possibility, a response, you can even say an answer would come. And then he would explore that further. But he wasn't running after it. He wasn't looking for it. He was just simply sitting with it. And one of the things that Einstein said is that it came to him. But if we're so busy doing, nothing can find us. Ideas can't find us. Ideas need a human body to come into being. And if we're so busy and doing, achieving, it's not to say that we shouldn't do anything at all, but it's where we move from. It's like you say that Brian the Snail and his house, where he's moving from into the world, this inner space. But Monet, why I bring up Monet, and I really love this story because I have imagined this with my sensory and my mental imagination many times. He was sitting in the garden once. Now, I want everybody just to use your imagination of you experiencing this. Sitting in the garden with the sun on his skin. And he feels the sun rays tickling his skin, teasing his pores. But he's just relaxing. He's really enjoying the sun and the whole environment outside in his garden by just being there. And he has a very nosy neighbor. imagine you are that neighbor, peeking over the wall, the fence, and saying, "Sir, are you resting?" And Monet wriggled his body a little bit, not even opening his eyes, and he said, "No, I'm working." And the next day, Monet, takes his painting equipment outside and he starts to paint vividly what he experienced and felt the previous day. Most beautiful piece of art. And he's just painting. And his neighbor pops over the fence again and he says, "Sir, are you working?" And he says, "No, I'm resting." And I love that because it says it all. It's in these moments of being present with whatever, without thinking, without worrying, all the concerns. And from that space, then to be so inspired that we're actually resting whatever we're going then to the activities itself afterwards. I just love it.
I absolutely agree. I don't know if you noticed I was there.
But I could see, I literally could, when I heard it the first time, I could see the neighbor peeking over, thinking he's working or he's resting. But it's actually the opposite that he experienced. And that reminds me of one practice that I love in terms of creativity. And if you get out of the boardroom if you have a problem in the business, or if you're studying and you are so tired, you wreck your brain, you are just so tired, you just can't concentrate anymore. Go outside into the sun, in the openness, into nature, and just sit in the sun, lulling. No particular reason, not looking for an answer to a problem or to solve a dilemma, to do crisis management. I guess a lot of leaders today in our world would have had a very different experience the last few months if they just went out into nature and just being and lulling, like daydreaming, just sitting there, not looking for something. I'm really curious what insights they would have had by simply being and disconnecting and stopping and taking a step back from whatever is happening and look at it from a different point of view, a different vantage point by just being. Because we have so much intelligence inside of us that we're not even aware of. And the collective intelligence that wants to communicate with us, but when we're busy, we can't do that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, as you're saying that, I love the fact that you've brought in nature. You know, one of the things that I'm passionate about is being in the natural world. I think there's a huge amount of benefits. One of those benefits is about moving from a doing mode into a being mode, the art of doing nothing, or perhaps the art of experiencing as opposed to doing. And my experience of being there is of a daydreamy like state, of creating this space that allows. The thing about spaces are, as we let go, as whenever there is a space, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, there is an invitation for something to move and emerge into that space. And if we're talking about this from the perspective of inner world, you know, what the question for me becomes then, what are these, when we create a space, what are these possible elements of ourselves that can come into that space. Well, one possible answer might be that there's a change in consciousness. And, you know, just holding that very loosely, we're talking perhaps then a change in, if consciousness, we can equate it to what we're experiencing or perceiving, we can say then that a change in consciousness means a change in what we're experiencing or what we are perceiving. And we started off by thinking about time and space. Well, that is perception, and how our perception can change. We've all had those moments, haven't we, where we've been engaged in something, whether it be something relaxing, whether it be something active. Let's, you know, hold that for a moment. But the whole experience can change to the point we lose track of time, to the point that we lose track of our own sense of body or being. You might finish an activity where all of a sudden you recognize, crikey, I'm really hungry. I don't remember being hungry, but now all of a sudden, there's a shift in my consciousness. I suddenly notice I'm hungry. So we've got this, as we create this space, we can shift our consciousness, we can experience and we can perceive in different ways. What sort of things then are we talking about? Well, I think for me, that's things like insights. It's being able to experience questions that come forward, and they often do. You notice something and you might go, well, what's that? Why is that like that? Why is that behaving in that way? The musings, there's something very intuitive about the nature of them. You know, this is not something that's forced. This is something that seems to flow and come forward. And not always, it's not. Do you get that experience, Hannelie, when you're consciously thinking about something, there seems to be a very logical sequence? You sort of hop from one thing to another thing. The consequence of this means that, and you sort of go down that, as I think William James would call it, the stream of consciousness, that line of thought or that line of inquiry. Well, these are the ones that appear from nowhere. These are the ones that I'm talking about, that just come into being from apps, and often in a sort of creative and playful way, like childlike curiosity. What's that? Why is that bird doing that? What makes a tree grow like that? You know, all of these sorts of things. But, you know, I'm picking on nature here because that's where often I get these things. But actually, it can be in any aspect of my being. You know, why did I do that? What was that about? Crikey, I never thought of that in that way. These things just emerge, but they often can only emerge because, I don't know, again, I don't know what your experience is like. I hope these are something that are similar, but sometimes I need that space to hear these questions, these voices, because if there's not that space, they can get drowned out by the living of life and all the other things that I have to think about. So it's almost like they're fragile flowers that it can easily get sort of trampled if we're not aware of them. But if we slow down and we let go of the doing and stand still, whether that's a metaphorical still or a physical stillness, there's that space to be able to notice these things. And there's something, a quality of an imaginative quality of them. It's when I feel at my most creative, my most, I want to use perhaps a strange word, integrative. It's when the connections occur that I don't normally It's when things fall into place.
Mm.
I hope some of that makes sense.
Yes. And I love it because that you mentioned that, because in my experience, it's in those moments, and I need a lot of that space that you're talking about. Personally, I need a lot of that space. I love the doing part as well, but if that personal space, that being space is not there, I can easily get exhausted then, because I'm very energetic, so I will go over top. But if I move from that space of beingness, I have a lot more energy, actually, a lot more. But it's my most creative spaces is, and these things, you don't think about it. They just come, like you say, it's a stream of consciousness. And for me, it gets babies along the line. And I have my own processes to capture all those babies. And I don't do anything about them because they're just there. So I'm not losing that either. So I capture it some way, in some way. But I'm not going to look now, oh, I must now do this with this one and that with that one. I allow that to inform me. And then after a while, I realize, oh, then I start making these connections. But it happens spontaneously. I'm also not looking to make the connections. It just starts happening. And I want to share a story with our beautiful audience here of how we actually got together. Because it's a perfect example of what can happen when we just sit with an experience and then intuitively guided to do something. So it's not straight away, we must do something. And to allow that process, that flow to unfold and develop and show its own face of what it might be. Because it's very easy for us to make, in my experience, very quick decisions about something. We define it immediately. What is this thing? And to allow it just to show us, it's a very different process, and it's a lot of fun. It's very playful, it's very creative. And we met at a wonderful friend hosted a series of, during the lockdowns, a series of conscious online engagement about the new normal. And it was a lovely process because we looked at the personal, the social, and in a professional way, we looked at it. But just being there with all you others, and I was the only one from this part of the world, on this part of equator, so to speak. And it was wonderful because I knew the lady who started that. And one of the other ladies who joined, I met for another online group before, but the other people I didn't know. And it was so wonderful to just be with everybody during that time, especially during such a turbulent time for everyone of what was going on in the world. But I remember myself, specifically with you now, I remember my awareness. I can't even remember whether I said something at that moment or whether one of the other people were sharing something. But I suddenly became aware of you as a being. Not looking for anything, just becoming aware of you. But inside me, there was movement in my body suddenly. So I knew there's something happening here. And at that, and we had a few sessions, and I didn't even reach out straight away. But there was this feeling going on, this unsaid communication on some level. I don't know what it was meaning. And then afterwards to reach out to you, and then we started engaging, and then we started exploring and wonderful things. And what you're experiencing today is just one of the babies of those experiences, because we became curious about, we both had the passions for very similar things. But it was that in just being part of somebody in an online groups, not even physically, becoming aware there's some movement here, something's going on here, and just following the flow of it. And that's what I love, is that natural flow that comes from the beingness part. Like not straight away, oh Lee, yeah, I am. Let's do something. So it was an unfoldment process over months. And for me, the delight is in the experience. And yes, we shared, and what we call knitting, different concepts. We triggered each other and stimulated and started exploring different things. But it's in the experience part, for me, that was really the delight of, wow, what is this about?
Absolutely, and thank you. And very likewise, you know, as you're sharing that, it reminds me of the Maya Angelou quote. And I'm probably not going to do it justice and get it right, so please, I apologize to anybody that's listening, but it's something along the lines of, it's not what you say, it's not what you do, but it's how you make somebody feel that is remembered. And I think, you know, likewise, there were in those moments that we did, they were difficult times. We were talking about the challenges that people were potentially facing in lockdown, but we're also talking about the potential and the possibilities that might come forward. And we ended up in a very nurturing, compassionate space where there was a real connection, a real heartfelt connection and respect for everybody, that people could let down perhaps some of those, get away from something, the doing that needs to impress or needs to be heard, or the doing that sort of needs this outcome from this meeting. And we ended up in a very generative space where I think people could bring forth their authentic character, their authentic, I'm going to call it a presence, because we felt the presence of each other, even though we were very potentially separated physically, but there was a presence. So, you know, perhaps as we're thinking about this art of doing, that as sometimes in doing less, that we give the invitation for the very essence, the qualities. Perhaps we're moving from a quantity-based existence. It's how much of this, how much of the time, how much have I said, to something that is very much about the quality. It's the quality of the experience. It's the quality of what I'm being. And in a sense, you know, thinking to do with mindfulness and meditation, and that's a practice I've been doing for many years now, certainly more than I want to count, and working with people in these areas. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes the challenges of not doing is the very fact that you come face to face with your being, with those qualities, and sometimes those qualities, there's challenges involved with those qualities. Accepting certain aspects of what I'm experiencing, it's not always great. And in fact, even so, I've worked with a lot of people, and it's something that I recognize most definitely in myself. Even when the qualities of what am I being, when people come and say, well done, that was really good, and that, no, that's not me. So even things that other people might feel are good experiences or good qualities can be uncomfortable for us to be in that presence of, to be with. But perhaps if we are able to, in time or through practice, be able to accept these aspects of ourselves, accept these qualities, there's a sort of mindful presence that you become, a sort of meta position, that you're this observational quality, that rather than engaging with that being, you can observe it, and you can say, okay, so yeah, like the cloud passing in the sky, this emotion, I'm not feeling great at this moment, I'm feeling sad, but I don't have to be sad. I'm experiencing sadness.
You just said it. And sorry for jumping in here, but I don't want to let this moment pass.
Go for it.
The difference between I feel sad, I am not sad. I feel sad. When I identify, and like you say, in the experience is what we identify with that makes us comfortable, because we have a mental concept about it. Even if the feeling is uncomfortable, it's something is happening, something's moving us, for whatever reason. And the triggering part of that is to then go back into that space of beingness. What does this want to tell me in this specific moment? Because the same thing can happen in 10 minutes, but I'll have a very different experience because it's not this moment. But there's so much gold in that, especially when I'm triggered. I love it when I'm triggered. It's horrific and horrible. But there's always something there if I'm willing to go the deep into it and to sit with it. What does it want to show me? And even maybe what it's showing me, it's uncomfortable to watch it, to notice this. But there's always gold in it. It doesn't matter whatever it might be without the judgments. I think if we can move away from right, wrong, good, bad experiences, simply sitting with it as it is, whatever it might be. How does it make me feel? But it's not to mean I am that. I'm just experiencing it. And I can now choose a different experience. And I can now look at it from a different perspective. Like, I'm seeing this now. If I open it, there's some really good stuff in here. It's called Karma Cream, by the way. And it's in hand lotion. And it's gentle almond oil and cocoa butter body lotion to soften your skin and perfume it with orange, patchouli, and pine.
Ooh.
Ooh, it smells fine. But what I'm trying to say is that if you smelled it and you didn't like it for whatever reason, and somebody wears it and you smell it then, it might be a very different experience. Like you were in their presence. It's quite potent. So when I put it on, you can smell it all over. It's like really in the whole room. It's like a diffuser. But you might have a very different experience when somebody walked past you wearing it. If you smelled it and you smelled, I don't like this smell. And it's okay. It's just not in this moment, I don't like it. But the experience is the richness of now somebody walks past and, I want to follow him or her because it smells divine. I want to know what that is. But there's curiosity that's raised then in that moment of asking a different question. Experience really be, instead of me identifying it with an old memory or another experience or comparing it with something, my frame of reference might be limited. But it's in this being state and being the living question, the asking the question of what might this want to show me. It can be really an adventure. Now, Lee, I want to put you on the spot now.
Okay.
Because asking the question, what can the art of doing absolutely nothing mean in living the question sense? There are many things we can explore by being, practices and ideas and things. And I know your love for nature. I'm aware that you have this passion for forest bathing. Do you feel that in forest bathing, your being, your sense of self, your beingness, that absolutely nothing, that's a lovely space to do that in?
Oh, very good question. Yes, and I think trying to link living the question and the art of doing nothing, I felt that you were sort of getting, you were at the place that I feel is where the two come together, and it's this concept of flow. As we perhaps might, for me, it's the forest is a therapy. The forest itself heals. There's no need for conversational therapy or any psychological therapy. Being there is the therapy. The forest itself is healing. You then come to the questions of how does it heal? And it's to do with this eco-mindfulness, the ability to become aware of the interconnectedness of all life and the dependency of all life on each other. And as we're in that space, there is this sense of being. Again, you know, I know these are themes that we've come to many times in this, but for me, this is the real essence and the real importance. So you're moving away from perceiving the future, the past, of having to do X, Y, and Z that the modern world asks of us. Here we're into the present, the here and now, and the experience of being here and now. And in doing that, we're inviting the flow of life, in my view, the flow of self, because the more we're in this being mode, this observational mode, what am I being? What are the qualities of my being? That we see that who we are is not something that is contained. I always have the image of like the Russian dolls, where you take one out. And I've worked with many people over the years as a coach and in various different therapeutic practices. And many people have come to me sort of hoping to peel away layers and find this who they are as something like the little doll inside. And yet the experience seems to be, as they go on this adventure, is there's not this little enemy to find, that there's something more blended, that there's this flow of self, there's this flow of being, perhaps more akin to the ideas of Taoism, where they talk about the energy of the qi, and an idea called wu wei, which is effortless action or inaction. What they're really saying there is a spontaneity, a free flowingness of spirit or mind or of self, that means that we don't have to put effort into being those things. So I tend to feel that the closer I get to nature, the more I feel connected with this flowing sense of self. And that is inherently healing. It's inherently, I believe that many people, and there's a lot of research also going into this. As you know, my background is working in education, research, universities, in psychology. And we're seeing that there's a lot of research in recent years that's being put medically, that's being put psychologically into these ideas that we have self-healing capacities, that we are not this conglomerate of parts that the modern world has tried to draw out of our being. What I mean by that is often research will break the human nature down into these definable, measurable parts and go, aha, you're a bit of this. It's what we call a reductionist view of the world, that we can take this complex being and break it down. The danger becomes that when you try to put all these parts together, you don't end up with the same thing, because what you're missing is the interaction between those parts. And that's if you imagine the connections, the relationships, that's what the invitation of being in the forest is. We recognize that we are not in nature. We recognize that we are nature. We are another relationship We are another connection in this vast web of connections, and every part of that has an influence on the other parts. We send out our presence, our being, our vibration, our energy, whatever word feels comfortable for you, but in essence they all have a strong overlap. They're all about the interrelational aspect, and that for me is the art of doing the nothing, is experiencing this flow of life, this flow of being, and recognizing that I am part of a greater flow. I think it was Joseph Campbell quoting a text that he read, and I think it was Far Eastern. He talks about it in two different ways. One of them is the idea of the ocean. We're all wavelets on one ocean. Or that in a lecture he pointed to the lights in the lecture theatre and said, you know, we are many light bulbs, but there is only one light. So there's this idea of our connectivity. Now, you know, whether we want to describe that connectivity in terms of consciousness or other things is immaterial, but I think what you start to see in immersion in the natural world is that we are part of that natural world. We are in a flow of life, and that for me is being, or the art of doing nothing.
Yeah. And you're also leading or guiding rather such sessions in nature, forest bathing sessions, wherever you are.
Yes, I don't strictly call them forest bathing. I call them forest therapy walks, purely on this idea that it's the forest that heals. How we connect and we experience with the forest, a very eco-mindfulness. It is a very meditative experience. It is very much about shifting consciousness and going from perceiving to the experiencing. And that in itself has a therapeutic healing quality, whether it's to do with relaxation, whether it's to do with the actual chemical soup that we're in when we're in the forest, because there are a whole plethora of very important and potent chemicals that are naturally released by the forest that have an impact on our well-being and health. But either way, the experience is such that people are rejuvenated. There's an idea in deep ecology that ecology is the study of organisms in their natural context. The idea of deep ecology is sort of transposing that onto human life and saying, well, actually, we can only really fully understand ourselves when we consider ourselves in the context of our natural environment. So in being exposed to the natural environment, we're exposing ourselves to ourselves. We're coming face to face with our being and seeing ourselves in a way that we perhaps don't get the opportunity to do when we're immersed in the modern world, because the pace and the distraction in the modern world is artificial. It's not what we're fundamentally designed to be. And when I say designed, I'm talking about evolution, or it could be a god, you know, I'm not disputing those sort of things, but why I'm saying that actually we evolved in this space, in this natural world. This that we've created is something that's artificial, that's something that we're not designed for. And incensed, I think this is where a lot of people have problems in life, and these are the things that they are bringing to therapeutic spaces. That actually the stress, the pressure, the tensions, the worries, the doubts, the fears are things that are created by we're this organism that's been put into a set of circumstances that bring out qualities of our nature, and many of those are fight and flight qualities. We're prepared for the fight and flight, except we've not really got things to fight and flight from. We've got things that are perceived and created by this world and these systems that we've made. But that's another question, another story that I can go on for many days, and perhaps shifts this in a slightly different direction. So I'll pull out while I've got while the going's good. But I hope somewhere in that you get a sense of what I'm meaning, and how then the forest perhaps is a very different experience.
And I think it is the felt real life experience of, again, we can talk about it and share about it, but it's physically going and being in nature, like you just explained so beautifully, that we will really, in being present to it and being in that space, again, space, that the things will start happening inside of us, to come back into balance, whatever it is we need in that specific moment, to live the life that we came to live. Whatever it might be. And again, from the conceptual to experiential and living that question, in terms of the art of doing absolutely nothing, for me, it's where everything starts. It's that potent energy of the moment, full of potential, infinite possibilities. It's really a fiery energy. There's so much inside of it, you know, that can happen. And it's how we then, from that, like we said earlier, like we step into the world from that space where we orientate ourselves, is how do we begin as we mean to go? Because in the world that we live is much from 0 to 100, I must achieve this. And 0 means I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I don't have enough, there's not plenty for everybody. It's a lack-based reality, so to speak, and fear-based. Because I need to constantly prove myself and consume more and gather more, that I can feel enough. But it's in the space of where I move from into the world, where how do I begin? And funny enough, the word begin and being is the same letter. And begin as you mean to go, from the to bring the two together, the concept and the experiential part. What's in the middle? It's the being, the person, the being part, and the state of being that I want to be in when I move into the world. And a state of being is not something I have to do. It's being. My state of mind, is it peaceful? It could be very excited. It is no good and bad there, but it's a state of being, the state of mind. And to move from that into the world. And that's what I love to play with, is to share embodied experiences in that. Embodied thinking, which is really wonderful because it's much about that space Monet was in, and that you speak about when you're speaking about forest bathing and your therapeutical explorations there. It's much about being in that space and to exploring it with all our senses without doing something yet. But it's to come to that, to explore, like this question, what can the art of being doing absolutely nothing, what can that living question be? And I think we want to leave a few questions for everybody about that. To choose one, whatever one feels resonant to you, and unfold it in our Facebook group. We will share the details of how you can connect to this Facebook group at the end of this experience. And we want to love to hear from you of what was unfurling for you, because again, it brings us back to nature. And there was a few ones here. I will start with mine, Lee. And the ones I'm curious about was, how do I find balance in my life? And how do I gain perspective? Is it when I'm in the doing part or in the being part, in the space of doing absolutely nothing? And this one I really love, because this brings me to the joy part of our joy of living questions. And it's, how can I come totally alive by doing absolutely nothing? And Lee, would you like to share the ones that came up for you?
Yeah, and as I do that, I mean, for me, the wonderful thing that we share here is the mirroring. When we're talking about this process, this flow of life, I think that living questions, you know, I love this idea that questions are alive and that we can live into. There's a wonderful Rainey Marie Rilke not poem, it's from Letters to a Young Poet quote about living questions. I won't try and quote it at this moment, but if you like poetry, have a look at that. It's beautiful. There's this idea that questions invite some form of flow. They invite us to explore through the questions, so we get these questions of flow. And for me, you know, as I'm stopping doing, what becomes my experience of being? What are the qualities of that being? And bringing it to this idea of flow of life, you know, where do these qualities of being come from? Where are they drawing from? Where is the energy of those coming from? And I think, you know, it's not answers that we're looking for here.
Mm-hmm.
It's the experience, it's the flow of being, it's the living the question. How can I step forward and live these things, explore them? Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. That's exactly. You just showed now my one question is about how can I come totally alive? You were demonstrating. and it's the, I'm curious personally, I'm curious about the feeling of it, of living that question, of experiencing it, and of really immersing myself in it, and everybody else too. Like whatever question sort of resonates with you, make you curious. I'm curious about how did you feel? Because for me, the next in the flow is the feeling part. And it's the juiciness, and that's where the joy comes in. Because it's, for me, it energizes, it inspires from the inside out. It's like you say, it's not about, we're not looking for answers at all. It's about the experience that living that question then is. Like, I'm taking one of your questions now. Where do these qualities of being come from? It really takes me in this moment. It's in all myself. That's where it comes from. But because I'm feeling it now, so it's not even the concept. So I really would like everybody to, we're going to put all these questions in our Facebook group, and you can play with all of them, or one or two, doesn't matter. But the invitation is really to feel them, to experience them, and to bring that conceptual and experiential together by the being part of doing nothing. And just see what flows out of that. And when it does that, I know there's something coming.
It's the beard tell, isn't it? I get all excited and I can't help it. What I'd like, if it's possible, let's see if I can calm myself down. If it's possible, what I'd love to do is put the invitation there as well, just a small gentle invitation. If there are questions that are emerging for people, you know, please share those questions as well. There's something here, there's two thoughts that are colliding together in my head. One of them is the Oracle of Delphi. in the Greek times, people would travel all over the country to come and have an audience with the oracle, who would give answers to questions. And they had to come in a state of humbleness. They had to come with offerings. But here's the crunch. They could only come with one question. So there's something here about the right questions, living the right questions. What might be those questions that emerge for me as an individual? And that leads me on to an experience from my coaching. Very often when working with clients, we've got to a point where there's something that feels stuck for the client. And a lot of the discussion has been around the context of this stuckness. But when, in my experience, when a shift is about to take place, it's also at the same time as a question emerges, not from me, but from the client themselves. They get to a point where they're asking themselves something, and that seems to be the kernel. And then the doing or the change that there's wanting to be manifested comes from living that question. So there's something here about getting the questions that are right for you. So have a play with the questions that we're bringing, but be aware of any questions that are emerging for yourself. What sort of questions are they? And perhaps bring them into the space. I'm not saying there's any Delphis of oracles of Delphi here. you might. Well, I'm not sitting on the volcano, that's for sure.
Well, there's a little secret about it. You are the oracle of Delphi, and so is everybody who is watching this. That's
Absolutely.
like in the Matrix.
Yes.
But that's inside of all of us. That oracle of Delphi, here is the beingness with everything contained in it, and flowing from it is the oracle of Delphi. So like you say, that specific question, and I wouldn't even call it the right question, I'd say that the one that's prevalent in this moment, thinking it is right or wrong, is just the one that's really going to make me come alive. And that was one of my questions. Is that one? It's going to stir something in me. It's like, and I love what you're saying, because synchronistically this morning, this came on my path about being stuck in the mud. When you feel you're really stuck in the mud, you can't move forward. You rock bottom. That's where the gold lies. That's where the gold, and you just shared it in another way of your experience with coaching clients. It's when we really want to bang our heads against the wall, when we feel depressed, frustrated, irritated. That's the creative tension that then allows that question to emerge from within us. And then we have to have the courage and the curiosity to explore it. What does it want to say to me? So for me, that type of doing is a lot more valuable than manic activities straight away. I must go and do this, or I must go and do that. But it is that courage to move from that place, and then to be wide awake and aware of what's emerging along the way, because everything is showing me signs that, what's showing up in my life. But it's that raw potential I'm talking about in the moment. It's like it really pulls something out of you. And you were sharing your questions. It brings down that energy of, so there's momentum in it. And if we begin to go from that type of energy, imagine what can we then achieve. Because it's a very different, that raw potential stays inside of us. We're never trained. We're never exhausted, stressed. Those things are not part of of our environment then. Because we've put this energy into whatever we're going to do. But we can't, that energy is not available to us when we are like all the time. And that's why your forest adventures sounds amazing. And I love nature too. I love to go to the forest as well. And it's in those times when I walk down to the forest or run down to the forest that I get most of my creative ideas, and when I sit just there and being part. And I'm really curious for everybody that this oracle of Delphi inside is going to start showing up. Because why is it prevalent today? For me, it is because there's so much going on in the world. What do we believe and what do we don't believe? What truth, what's my truth in all of this, what's happening? And this space of the art of doing absolutely nothing and the joy of living questions, so we live the question, is where we will find our own treasures in this time around the world. Instead of looking for it outside and the doing part, it's yeah.
Don't have to teach the acorn to be an oak tree.
Exactly. It's all already in there. The apple, even this, there's a whole orchid waiting inside here. In this one lemon, a whole orchid of lemon trees. All the intelligence is already inside of us. It's not outside of us. All the things we experience outside is pure joy and enriching our experience and giving it all sorts of nice nuances. But it makes it, it expands our perception, and it helps us to look at things from different vantage points and then to explore and experience that. So it really enriches our experience deeply on different levels. But it starts here with being part and absolutely doing nothing. Lee, I have to tell you guys and girls this. Me and Lee, I teased in the beginning, and I said, I wonder what would happen if we start the experience with me and Lee here now, and we say, welcome to the art of doing absolutely nothing, blah, blah, blah. And then nothing. And we just sit here for an hour or whatever. And then we end the video. I wonder what your experience would have been. You would have said, these people are crazy. So I want to thank everyone for exploring this together with us. It's an adventure, a quest together. So I want to invite you all, come on this quest with us. We don't have the answers. We're not looking for answers. We're not here to tell you anything. We are inviting an experience and living those joyful questions, and whatever is unfolding, the uncomfortableness part, the challenges, everything, the inspirations, the insights, whatever it might be, to share with us. And the unfurling part is what we are really curious about. And your own questions, like you said, Lee. Each of us, our own questions. And we're going to do the same. We are on this journey together.
Thank you.
He's quiet.
I can't say any better than what you said there, Hannelie. Thank you ever so much. I'm really excited and looking forward to this journey, this flow, and it is, and we're in it together. I don't do it the same justice as you did it.
No. Thank you, everyone. And my own experience in terms of being and doing is where we really would like to invite you is just to do the one part, is to join the Facebook group and to start unfurling together with us. And that doesn't mean manic activities, but whatever emerges through the process. So thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.